You're listening to a Thames Estuary Partnership podcast, celebrating London's famous tidal river. We hope you enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Eve Sanders and I'm the Estuary Edges Officer at the Thames Estuary Partnership. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Thames. I hope you're all keeping well during this long winter lockdown. Today, we are taking a slightly different approach and talking about something which isn't just Thames specific. We are delving into how connecting to your local coastal region can not only benefit your health and well-being, but can also help with ocean recovery. This lockdown has been long and hard, and we've turned to our natural spaces for solace. How people choose to connect to their coastal region and the benefits that brings to both our health and well-being and also the health of the ocean is a growing body of research. And appropriately, my guest today is the wonderful Dr Emma McKinley from Cardiff University. Emma is a marine social scientist and her research focuses on understanding the complex relationship between society and the sea. Hello, Emma. Thank you very much for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. Not too bad. Much warmer than last week. It was quite cold, so I'm okay.
It was very cold. So Emma, can you start by telling me a bit about some of your awesome research?
Yeah, of course. So I am, as you said, a marine social scientist. And so I very broadly look at how people, different types of people, different places, how we interact with and engage with particularly marine and coastal systems, so the sea, the ocean and coastlines. And so I work on lots of different projects at the moment. I'm very lucky to get to do that. One of the projects I work on is called Coastal Communities Adapting Together, or CCAT for short. And we are looking at how coastal communities are responding to climate change, their resilience and their adaptive capacity, and trying to understand how different attitudes and values that people might have around climate change might influence their behaviour, and what that might mean for climate action or climate change action in coastal areas. This project particularly looking at communities in Ireland on the North Dublin coastline and in Wales on the Pembrokeshire coastline, so some lovely places. And then I also work really closely with the Severn Estuary Partnership, one of the coastal partnerships that work on the area across the Severn between England and Wales. And we do lots of things that kind of try to engage local communities around the Severn Estuary in their local environment, do work around marine planning, thinking about different, how people connect to the estuary and what that means for their well-being. And then all of this, I try and understand how we feed this into policy. So all the bits and pieces that I do that try to explore people's relationship with the sea and the coast, essentially, is I try to think about how we can use that information to develop more effective policy and management for our coasts and our seas.
That sounds incredible. I mean, it's such a lot and such an important topic as well, looking at the relations between those things. It's fascinating. And with sort of talking about community resilience to climate change, that's such an increasingly important body of work, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so.
So we sort of, I mean, I'm aware of how when I walk next to a river or by the sea, I automatically feel very calm and relaxed and just much more clear-headed. So how are the ocean and how are rivers good for us?
I mean, I guess one of the first things to say is that those spaces will be beneficial for different people in different ways. So we'll all respond to and react to those environments in a really wide-ranging kind of set of ways. I mean, I'm like you, as soon as I'm around coastal spaces, I feel much more relaxed. And actually, I much prefer rocky, stormy shores than sandy, beautiful beaches. I find the drama really therapeutic. And lots of other people will find the calm palm trees, sandy beach, golden sands and blue skies really therapeutic. So I guess that's one thing to recognise, is that we will all find different bits and pieces of these spaces beneficial. And I guess the way we use those spaces is really different. So for some people, it will be the physical use. So they're actually using those spaces for recreation, for physical activity, and it will be that gives them the benefit, that they kind of get the enjoyment from, or they get the restoration or the calm from. And for others, it will just be the walking around, the sense of calm, the space to think, those kind of spectrum of well-being aspects that we will get from rivers, coasts, seas, and the ocean. I mean, I think there's a really growing body of work that's kind of really starting to explore the value of those blue spaces, those water-based spaces. And when we compare it to different environments, to parks, to kind of green environments, actually the research is quite new. Like, we're still sort of trying to work out what those benefits are, or how they differ from different types of environment. And there's been some great projects recently that have kind of explored that. So there's been the SOFI project, which was an EU funded project, and that really tried to explore the public health and well-being benefits of different types of blue spaces across Europe, and how engaging people in different ways. So there were things like getting people swimming in lakes, getting people out to the coast, and really trying to investigate how different types of people will benefit from different activities in different places, all about really connecting to nature and connecting to water. That's kind of where it all kind of comes from. So I guess, I mean, they're good for us in so many different ways. It's kind of hard to put one reason on there. It'll be different for everybody. And that's part of what my work, and the work of lots of people working within marine social sciences, is trying to do, is to understand that actually those relationships are quite complex, and there's not going to be a one size fits all, but it's really important that we understand that breadth of use and benefit and connection that people have to rivers, to estuaries, coasts, seas, etc.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And like you said, there are so many ways that people choose to connect with their local coastal region, like wildlife watching, or recreation, or even just, walking or running, exercising, I suppose. But I think it's so important that it's becoming much more researched and understood, because hopefully that could lead to better protection of our coastal areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there an area that's already taking shape around? Is there an area where people, you've sort of learnt how people connect with that particular coastal region, and that's then impacted perhaps policy or change?
I think that's still a bit of work that we're trying to do, and we're trying to really build that into policy making now. I think it's quite early days for some of those conversations. So we're definitely having much more, or we're seeing that there's much more focus on those cultural and well-being aspects when you're having conversations with policymakers. So, for example, in Wales, there's the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and where well-being has to kind of take centre stage for a lot of the decisions that are being made. So that's fed directly, or at least aligned directly, with the development of Wales's National Marine Plan, and how we then kind of encourage coastal communities across Wales to engage with their coastal spaces. So I think it's still early days for that to have been implemented, but the really encouraging thing is that we're having those conversations. The awareness of those aspects is really kind of becoming more and more apparent, and I guess never so much really. And then in the last 12 months or so, we've seen so much focus on, the encouragement of getting people out into nature where and however they can. And so yeah, I mean, there are some examples of some projects that we've run. So Severn Estuary Partnership, for example, ran a project called Discover the Severn a couple of years ago. That was funded by Natural Resources Wales, and that was really very much about trying to get communities who maybe don't normally access the estuary to get out and engage with it and learn about it, kind of raise awareness of the opportunities that it might have and it might give them from a recreational perspective, or just kind of getting out and using it with their families, their friends, and really trying to think about how that engagement could impact their well-being. But again, that was maybe a year or so ago, and I think the pathways of how to influence policy are still being worked out a little bit. But like I said, we're having the conversations, which is really encouraging.
On the right track.
Yeah, on the right track. Slowly.
That is positive. That's very positive. And I guess, of all this, well, I mean, it has just been a really hard, year for lots of people. But I suppose if anything is to come out of this time, then the fact that people might be paying more attention to their, if they're lucky and they live by the sea or a river, then paying more attention and getting out there more, connecting better with their local nature patch or coastal zone is a real positive to that. But on that subject, a lot of people have, particularly talking about estuaries, a lot of people see an estuary and they see it as a brown sort of dirty space. But how do we change people's minds and get them to see it as a positive space and that's just a natural process?
I think that's a great question. It's such a difficult thing because I know that, when we take our dog out to the estuary here, we take him down to Penarth or somewhere else along the estuary. And if it's a particular day where there's been a particularly heavy rainfall or just particularly windy, and I know that it's muddier because of that, I know that's why it's browner, but it still makes me go, oh, do I want to get in? Do I want to get in for a swim in the summer? And so I can totally see it. It was really moving here, actually. That kind of made me really see that where I lived previously, it was coast proper, like it was the Sussex coastline. You just got into the sea, but it was really moving to Cardiff and engaging with an estuary in that way that really made me kind of see, oh yeah, no, I can see why that would be problematic and challenging for people, because the perception is that it's dirty, that it's muddy, that it's not productive, it's not healthy. And so I think we have got some work to do there. I think, again, coming back to the same way that people will use these spaces in different ways, people's perceptions, their values, their attitudes, of course, will be really different for different types of people. And part of us being able to change perceptions is to understand where people are at and to understand where we're starting from and what they do connect with, what they do value. Or if they're not, like why they're not. Is it a fear? Is it a lack of awareness? Is it a lack of knowledge about the system? Do they think there's something scary in the muddy water? It's about understanding where people are at and their connection to a space. And I think, a lot of my work has been around marine and coastal spaces, but the same thing applies to our estuarine environments. And that's what some of the work that we were doing with Discover the Severn was trying to really say, okay, so you might not know this, but actually these really cool species live in the estuary. Like, it's a really important place for these migratory fish species, for these bird species. There are all these protected sites. It's hugely important for conservation. And I think there is an element of trying to raise awareness in that kind of way. I think it's more complicated than just kind of giving people knowledge. We know that just because somebody knows some information, it won't necessarily change behavior. But I think the more we can do that, the more we can create that sense of awe and inspiration about our natural spaces, the more we can kind of hopefully create that connection. And, maybe it's not about connecting people to environments because of the reasons we think they're important. It could be for very different reasons. It could be because, I don't know, they used to go on walks in the mud with their grandparents when they were children. It's not necessarily going to be for the same conservation issues that people like me working in that space might think are important. And so that's why I think it's really important that if we're trying to change perceptions or connect people, I think it's more that not so much about changing perceptions, but it's about fostering connection and fostering that stewardship and helping people see the beauty and the value in these spaces. Then we have to kind of start with where they're at and why and how they connect to the environments. And I guess one of the things that I think kind of connects to the work I do around marine and coastal spaces is that our estuaries are kind of our gateway to the ocean. They're our gateway to the coast. And I think for me, somewhere like the UK, where we're just not that far away from the coast, from the sea at any point, estuaries are like our local ocean. They're like our local coastline. So perhaps that's an avenue to try and create that bigger connection to the estuary and to the coast, to kind of say, okay, but whatever we do here, whatever we do in this space, this on land that goes into the river, it all kind of comes down and affects the bigger system. And I think that thinking about people's different values, thinking about that whole system approach, I think can help us create those connections and foster that engagement.
I really like that, using that term, like fostering engagement and people's connection to the ocean. I think is really like quite a powerful way of putting it, because it's very easy to say, oh, you want to change people's perceptions, but that's a huge sentence. Like what you need to do is get people to value their to value their coastal region, or as you say, estuary, and from that grows the, I guess, engagement, and the rest of it comes with that. But yeah, that's very, very interesting, and getting people to realize that they're not far away from the ocean through things like rivers and estuaries, and even through the water in their taps. It's all interconnected, and I just trying to get that across to people is the sort of golden question, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I'd said about it's more than changing perceptions, I think there's a risk that we make people feel like their perceptions are wrong, or that they're not allowed to feel the way they feel about a space. And actually, I think we need to try and move away from that a little bit and kind of say, okay, so that might be how you feel about that particular environment. Why? What are the barriers that you felt to engaging with that environment? Is it because you can't swim? Is it because you've never experienced or engaged with those places? Is it because you've got really bad memories of being on a boat? And it's just, there are lots of valid reasons why people might feel the way they feel about a place. And so it's about understanding that and then kind of bringing them along with the story. It's not going to be a one-stop kind of situation. It's going to be a process where, and that's why community engagements always needs resources and time, because you need to kind of get to the nitty-gritty of people's relationships with these places, and then work with them, understand their viewpoints, their values, get them to tell you what might work, what you might need to do to help them get there. And so it should be a real two-way dialogue, rather than researchers and policymakers going in and saying, we need to change how you think. I think we've moved on from that, which is great. And I think we're starting to have conversations where it's much more about building on the relationships people already have and using that to foster that stewardship, that idea of ocean literacy, all those sorts of things.
Such an interesting topic, isn't it? I love it. It's good to talk in detail about it more. It's not really, it is related to what I do most of the time in terms of the sort of citizen science stuff of it, and engaging people that way. But yeah, it's nice to have an opportunity to talk about it more. But how can, during this COVID-19 pandemic, what can we say to people to get them to get out and use their estuaries, their rivers, their coastal zones safely during this time?
So I guess the first thing to say is, obviously we're still at a time where restrictions are fairly kind of in place, and movement's fairly limited. So obviously right now we're going to be a bit limited by the travel restrictions that we have in place. And right now I can't get to the coast, which is very upsetting. I think the last time I was at the coast was Christmas Day, which was the day I was allowed to go, but I've not been since. But I think if you are lucky enough to live somewhere where you can access those blue spaces, is get out on the days that you can, wrap up warm, get out for walks, bring your dog, bring your kids, bring your friends, that you live with, and they can do so in a socially distant way. But going to get out in nature, it's never going to be something you regret, really. There might be a day where you're like, I don't really feel like going outside, but it does have that impact on that fresh air, that well-being benefit. And I suppose we need to be careful not to overwhelm our coastal communities when travel restrictions are lifted. We do need to think about not completely overwhelming those spaces. We saw images last year where our coastal environments were absolutely inundated by all of us trying to get to the coast, and I can totally appreciate why. But making sure we're thinking about that, and we're using places sensibly, that we're bringing home our rubbish, that we're not dumping PPE, masks, gloves, that we're being really careful about how we're using our spaces, picking up dog fouling, all that kind of thing, and that we are looking after our coastal spaces, our rivers, our estuaries, and making sure that they're there for us in this way in the coming years. And I guess the other thing to say is that there are lots and lots of organisations and groups, Thames Estuary Partnership included, that have made a lot of resources that have been made available over the last 12 months to give people access at times when they haven't been able to access nature and haven't been able to access the coast. And I think it's important to recognise that even outside COVID-19, there will be people who aren't able to access our rivers, our estuaries, our coasts for various reasons. It could be transport, it could be disability, it could be a number of reasons. And I think we need to, if we want to try and enhance that connection, we need to think about how we can first make that access more equitable. So how we can create more equal access for everyone in the UK to these spaces. and also think about how we can use technology to create that access when we're not able to physically be there. So things like the Tidal Thames virtual tour, the Severn Estuary did a Discover the Severn video as well. I know the National Marine Aquarium in Plymouth have done lots of amazing films. The North Devon Marine Pioneer Project, they did a series of films as well. And I think using technology to create a sense of being and a sense of access in these spaces it's not the same, but I think there are some things that we can do there even when we can't actually get out into those spaces in reality. Listening to the sounds of water, I find that very therapeutic. So finding playlists on Spotify, that sort of stuff. I think there's lots that we can do to engage with those spaces when we can't actually access them. And then when we are able to get out and about again, making sure that we're being sensible and that we're behaving we're looking after those spaces, we're being stewards of those spaces, that we're using them responsibly. And that's really, really important.
Very true. Yeah, thank you. But I feel like that's a really important message to everyone to sort of look after those spaces whilst they're looking after us.
Yes.
But also for going back to talking about just listening to the sounds of the river or the ocean can relax us. And I think it was the marine collaboration that did the Sound Waves project, where they sort of tested and played these sounds to people, and it was shown to make a percentage difference in terms of like pain reduction and relaxation and blood pressure and all these amazing benefits that you don't even think about, when you hear those sounds, or you're by the sea or a river.
Yeah, I mean, and they're the kind of benefits that I'm so interested in, but personally it's outside my area of expertise. But I know I feel them, and I know there are some great researchers. So there's people in Plymouth Marine Lab, there are people in Exeter that are really exploring those physiological responses and how our bodies actually react to those sounds. And actually I was part of the We Are Ocean sessions a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of the month, and we had a session from a guided meditation from someone based in South Africa, and she kind of said, we are of the ocean, we are of the water, and our bodies remember that. And maybe that's part of what it comes down to. It's that kind of innate connection to nature, and I think for me that was a really kind of important message, and definitely something resonates with me. I think we just need to figure out how we get that message out more broadly.
For sure. Yeah. And also, talking about, we've been saying throughout this chat, we've been calling it the ocean, covering all of the so-called different oceans. What's the messaging behind that? Why are we saying the ocean?
So that comes from a campaign that's been led in part by the Marine Collab and others who've kind of said drop the S, and kind of trying to recognise that we have one connected ocean that has different characteristics in different places, but actually that it is all connected. It is part of this big system. And I think for me, that message really, really kind of, I really bought into that. And I really think that's actually quite important. If we're expecting people to, up in the upper estuary of the Thames to connect with the Mediterranean, or to connect with the deep South Antarctic Ocean, and trying to kind of really say that everything we do on land has an impact on the ocean, I think we do need to kind of recognize and emphasize that interconnectivity and that those links across the whole planet. And the ocean doesn't just suddenly go, oh whoops, no, this is Wales, and oh, this is England. It is all connected. There aren't the same barriers that there are or kind of physical changes as you would see in land. So I think that message behind it's one ocean and it's all connected has the real potential to hopefully kind of raise that awareness and that, I guess, connect people more to the ocean, connect their everyday lives to the ocean.
Definitely. So there we go, people, drop the S. It is one ocean.
It's one ocean, absolutely.
So just to end then, Emma, talking about, we've already sort of touched on this, but to go in a bit more detail, we've spoken about how us re-engaging with our coastal regions, what benefits could we see to ocean recovery?
So I mean, obviously there are benefits for us, but in terms of ocean recovery, one of the key things really is that we, by connecting people, by increasing their awareness and their understanding of the role of the ocean, of our seas, of our coasts, of our rivers and estuaries in our everyday lives, we hopefully, one, can encourage more sustainable behaviour, so we can get people thinking about what they do in their everyday lives that they could change, or that they could adapt, so that they're impacting, or that there are fewer negative impacts on the ocean, on nature more broadly, really. So there's a personal kind of individual behaviour change aspect. There's also things like increasing the social acceptability of particular management plans or interventions, or kind of industry development. So if we have a greater understanding of the need for more renewable energy, for example, or moving towards a low carbon economy, maybe then there'll be a greater acceptance or public buy-in for more renewable energy placed in sustainable places, not conflicting with conservation issues. But you get that kind of idea where if there's a greater understanding, a greater level of awareness, then there could be of kind of the role of the sea and the ocean, then we get greater acceptance, engagement with things like marine protected areas and marine planning, more responsible behaviour from recreational users, perhaps people picking up their dog poo. It could be as simple as that, it could be as simple as those really small scale behaviours, but all that ties into a greater amount of public momentum. And we saw how powerful that was when we saw the response to Blue Planet 2, and we saw the plastics bags and single-use plastics momentum really take off quite quickly in response to Blue Planet 2, and that was at an industry, a policy and an individual level. So we know that when people become aware, when they become connected to an issue, there can be quite quick change. We can see widespread change in quite a rapid turnaround. But and I think we need to kind of look at how we can harness some of that momentum for some of these other issues that we need to think about from an ocean recovery perspective. But yeah, I think really it's about raising awareness of the value and the importance of our ocean, our coastal spaces, the biodiversity they house, they support, the role, the importance of all of this, the value of all of this in our lives. And the fact that we do need to restore and recover those spaces, particularly as we look at how things are going to change in response to climate change over the coming years. So yeah, I think there are a few kind of scales or levels of where impact could be felt, really. The more we can do to connect people with these spaces, with the environment more generally, I mean, if we can create that nature connectedness, then we've got a hope really of changing behaviour and of getting it fed into policy, and of really protecting our environment for the future. I mean, I think all the conversations that we're having around ocean and coasts, the same messages that need to be true for our rivers, for our estuaries, for our valuable terrestrial and land-based areas as well, our floodplains, our moorlands, our upland peat bogs, all of those places. And I think fundamentally it is about creating more connection and sense of value, I guess, about the environment and the role it has.
Emma, thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, your research is awesome.
But no, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed having a chat.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Talk of the Thames. I really enjoyed my conversation with Emma, and it was great to learn more about the research into the importance of reconnecting society to our coastal regions. If you're now feeling inspired to explore your local Thames Path this lockdown, visit www.thamespath.org.uk for safe walking routes and more information. Until next time, keep safe. Bye-bye.